Chapter 5. It would be hard to say what section qualified as the seedy part of the quarter. Unnaturals have different sensibilities about that sort of thing. Many haunters, underground dwellers, sewer jockeys, and walking dead don't mind ramshackle appearances, piled garbage, or thick shadows. In fact, some landlords charge a premium for particularly run-down buildings on the assumption that it adds atmosphere. Whatever the definition, I knew we had found the seedy part of town. Sheldon Fennerman lived there. Definitely an odd location for a decorator. He led me to an old brownstone, and we went down 3 steps to his front door, several feet below sidewalk level, as if the underground tunnels were starting to swallow the building. Stout iron bars fronted Sheldon's door. Another set covered each of the 2 painted-over windows. Looking back and forth, convinced we were being followed, Sheldon told me to stay close. He dug in his overcoat, fished out a crowded key ring. The keys rattled as he held them in his shaky hands. He worked 1 deadbolt, then the next, then 3 more, until he had unlocked all 5 of them. I heard a click, and he pushed open the door.
"Quick, come inside."
"Nothing to worry about, Mr. Fennerman. Anyone who comes after you has to get through me first." I realized that would have sounded more reassuring if I myself hadn't been gunned down in an alley. After I followed the vampire into his apartment, he slammed the door, hooked the chains, and threw all 5 of the deadbolts.
"Home, sweet home."
At last, Sheldon let out a huge sigh of relief.
"It's not fair. Hoodlums, vandals, and murderers can just break in wherever they want, but vampires have to be invited into someone's home."
I frowned. I thought the by-invitation rule applied only if the person is actually a homeowner. Vampires can enter rental properties at will. Robin had done an analysis 6 months ago for a breaking and entering case. Sheldon groaned.
"Now that's a nuance I wasn't aware of. Something else to worry about."
The vampire's apartment was a dim place with burnt orange shag carpeting and blocky, dark-stained Mediterranean-style furniture. Although Sheldon was a recent inductee into the ranks of the undead, I got the impression that he wanted people to think he'd been turned into a vampire back in the early 1970s. A framed poster on the wall showed a kitten dangling from a branch with the encouraging words, "Hang in there." For an interior decorator, he had an unusual sense of style. "Let's do a quick security sweep, Mr. Fennerman."
"Sheldon, please."
"Of course, Sheldon. Looks like you've already taken most of the first step precautions I'd recommend. How many exits do you have?"
"Just the front entrance and a small back door that leads to an alley."
"Could be a point of vulnerability. Bad guys would rather break in through a dark alley than the front door in plain view. Let's check your windows." I made a full inspection of the premises and found no obvious weak points. The window bars were secure, and both the front and back doors had durable locks. "You've done a good job by yourself, Sheldon. No one's going to get in here easily."
"But I still don't feel safe. What about the sharpened stakes at my doorstep? Once there was even a wooden mallet. And the disappearing neighbors. Somebody hates vampires, Mr. Chambeaux, but I have no idea who or why. Haven't they read Twilight?"
"I'll see if I can get any leads on who's behind this, and Officer McGowan will keep an eye out when he walks the beat. I'll follow up on the straight-edgers, even do a stakeout, if you excuse the expression. Possibly tomorrow, depending on my other cases."
"Oh, I feel safer already," Sheldon said, beaming. "So many of my vampire friends, my book club buddies and dinner club companions, they've just vanished, one after another. No sign of a scuffle and no bodies. They must have turned to dust, and I'm sure I'm next."
"You're not next, Sheldon, because you hired me. I'm going to get to the bottom of this." The vampire grew as warm and fuzzy as a werewolf under a heat lamp.
"I knew I could count on you, Mr. Chambeaux. And now that you're here, why not stay for dinner?"
On a small kitchenette table he'd set out a red enameled pot, 2 placemats, red linen napkins, and long forks at each place setting.
I love fondue, don't you?
Fondue? I was more of a sandwich sort of guy.
A very civilized dinner for special occasions. Just little bites, bread and cheese, bouillon or hot oil. I can make whichever you prefer.
I figured that the best thing I could do for Sheldon right now was to start nosing around. Thank you, but I've got a lot of cases to work on, including yours. I've got investigating to do. And a 3:00 appointment at the embalmer. He looked crestfallen.
Of course, I should have realized. Everyone's so busy these days. I started a bridge club for my neighbor vampires, but it was difficult to keep them coming back. I guess they just weren't that interested in cards. My next idea was a book club to discuss the latest bestsellers, but that didn't go well either. Maybe I should have chosen a more literary book?
He let out a wistful sigh.
We had a dinner club, and I even tried to arrange ballroom dancing lessons for everyone. And outings. Did you know that groups can charter a leather-upholstered hearse for a guided tour of the quarter? Tinted windows, of course. I thought that would be so much fun, but nobody showed up.
You did all this for your neighbors? I began to have my doubts.
Someone had to act as the vampire's social director, otherwise they'd get lonely.
I asked carefully, and when did these other vampires begin disappearing?
Right after our first book club discussion. Another friend vanished before the next bridge night. Then when I suggested a French-themed potluck, nobody came over at all. That got me so scared that I went out to each person's apartment, and no one was home. Some apartments were entirely empty. It's not natural, I tell you.
And how often did you have these get-togethers?
Not as often as I'd have liked, but I tried.
His eyes were large.
Only 4 or 5 nights a week, but I was open to suggestions, and now they're all dead, he moaned. I should have done more.
I tried to reassure him. When I come back to do the stakeout, I'll check with the landlord. Try to get a look at the empty apartments. I glanced at my watch. Don't worry, Sheldon. I'll get to the bottom of this, and you'll be able to sleep easy all day long. The sharpened stakes and mallets on his doorstep were a definite sign of mischief, possibly left by a group of teenage vampires with too much angst for their own good. But there was also the possibility that the missing neighbors had slipped away for their own reasons. If I did find the answers I suspected, I wasn't sure Sheldon would want to know.